Welcome back to the Mind Body Project. Thanks for taking a little time to join me today. There's a story that it's gone around the internet, on social media. I've seen it a lot, but I just think it's a great story, and it kind of shares the idea and thought that I want to share with you today. It talks about this father. He is dying, and he has this watch that his grandfather or his father gave him. And it was almost 200 years old, and he told his son, he said, before I give it to you, I want you to go to the jewelry store downtown and tell them I want to sell it and just see how much they offer you. So the son goes, okay. So he goes down to the jewelry store and he comes back and tells his father, he said, they offered me $150 for it because it was just too old. And father said, okay. He said, well, go to the pawn shop. Go to the pawn shop and see how much they'll give you for it. So the son goes to the pawn shop. He comes back to his father and he said, Dad, the pawn shop only offered me $10. They said it looks too worn out. It's too old. They said it's 200 years old. Father asked the son, he said, okay. He said, it's the last place you have to go. He said, I want you to go to the museum. There's a museum here in town. Go to them. Take this 200-year-old watch and just see what they'll give you for it. The son said, okay. So he goes to the museum. He comes back to see his dad, and he says, Dad, he said, the curator offered me $500,000 for this very rare piece to be included in their precious antique collection. The father looked at his son and he said, son, I just wanted to let you know that the right place values you in the right way. Don't find yourself in the wrong place and get angry if you're not valued. Those that know your value are those that appreciate you. Don't stay in a place where nobody sees value. His dad said, know your worth. And I just think it's such a powerful story as we talk about today about the value we offer in a place is the best place for us, and where we're valued the most is the place for us. It's the pawn shop was going to give him $10 for this worn out piece of junk, whereas a museum was going to give him $500,000 for this rare antique. And I thought about this story. My wife and I came a few weeks ago. We went to the PBR finals, the professional bull riding finals. They were in Fort Worth, Texas. So we went there to check it out, and we enjoy the PBR. It's a lot of fun. Love to see all those bull riders ride. And I just think they're some of the toughest guys. They'll get hurt. They might get on with, a broke leg, a broke foot, a broke arm, as long as it's not their hanging on arm. They're just amazing. They'll get on and just ride the heck out of it and be all beat up, and they'll just got stepped on. I just think there's some amazing guys that just keep getting back on every time they get. I think it's a good thing to look at for life. When we get stomped on, these are big old bulls. They're getting stomped on, hammered on, thrown, tossed. These guys keep getting back on. And I think about that when something happens to me in life, and I think, get back on. You're not hurt. Go again. Get back on. You can do it. And as we were watching this past a few weeks ago of the PBR finals, and the cowboy, the bull rider that won, his name was Rafael Jose de Brito. And he won Rookie of the Year. He won the event that day, for the event that round, but then he also won the overall. So he took home about that Sunday afternoon, over the couple weeks of riding and through the year, but just from that event, the PBR finals, he took home about $1.5 million. He was a rookie from Brazil. A lot of bull riders, there's a lot of them are Brazilian, and he came to ride as a rookie. He won, and that's not including all of his earnings throughout the year. That was just for that event. That's the PBR finals. He was taking home about $1.5 million. And as I thought about that, and I thought about the story, and about the father and the watch and the son, and I was thinking about who in the world, I'm not quite sure how many rides he rode over the event, maybe 5 or 6, 7 maybe. We're talking about, if he stays on, 8 seconds. And when we think about, if we divided those seconds, all the seconds combined that he stayed on a bull, into that $1.5 million, that would be an insane amount of money per second. Not per hour, per second. And I thought, well, what makes that valuable? And then I thought back to the story, and I thought, he had to put himself in the right place. Would he necessarily been able to get $1.5 million on top of all of his earnings in Brazil with his skill? Probably not. Not at all. He came to the United States, got into the PBR, got onto a team, got into the PBR finals, and won $1.5 million because he found the place that valued him, the place that valued what he could offer. And if you've never watched a PBR event, it's an amazing thing. It's a lot of action, it's a lot of noise, it's a lot of music, it's super entertaining. It's just a really neat thing to be at. And if you've just been listening to the Mind Body Project, if you go way back to one of my first, it's probably within my first 6, 7 episodes of the show of when we started a couple years ago, I was able to interview Cody Lambert, one of the founders of the PBR, which was a great time. So I encourage you to go back and listen to that. It was just a neat interview, and exciting to see where they started to where the PBR. They just celebrated 30 years of the PBR. And as I watched that, I think back to my interview with Cody, and I think about where they started, where those Cowboys started back in the 90s. And what it has evolved in today. They saw their value, and they put themselves in a place that valued them. Most of them are still part of the PBR in different ways, different things. But as I thought about value, and I thought about what Rafael Jose de Brito brought to it, I thought about, how was he valued? He had to add value to himself before he could be valued by others. So what do I mean? He had to work on, he had to learn how to be a better bull rider. He had to learn, maybe he had to work out, he had to learn different techniques, how to know which way to go, which way to turn, how to hang on to the rope, all these different things he had to learn to become a better bull rider, to be able to beat all those other bull riders to win $1.5 million in the PBR finals. And so as I thought about, how do we add value to ourselves? How do we add value to ourselves to put ourselves in the best place that values us? And the first thing is invest in yourself. Jim Rohn, I love listening to Jim Rohn. He's, if you ever listen to Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn was Tony Robbins' mentor. Jim Rohn just has a great voice, has a lot of great simple things that you go, why didn't I think about that? Come on. But Jim Rohn says that we should spend more time on ourselves than we do at our jobs. Think about, you go to work, let's say you work a 40-hour week. You work a 40-hour week. Did you spend 40 hours on yourself this week? There's no time. But 40 hours might be, you are adding value to yourself by your spending time in a hobby. You're learning. You're taking experiences. You're reading. You're doing these different things that add value to yourself, that help you become more valuable. And when you invest in yourself, because don't we invest so much time and energy into work, but we don't invest that same time and energy necessarily to ourselves. Why do CEOs of companies get paid millions and millions of dollars? Because of the value they bring to that company. If we broke it down to an hourly rate, you think, that's no way they're worth that. But they're worth that because of the value they bring. Why is a minimum wage called minimum wage job? Because we bring the minimum value needed to that position. We can't, if we agree to take that minimum wage job, we can't get upset, well, I'm worth more than that. How many times have you gone to ask for a promotion and say, I'm worth more, but have you done any work on yourself to be able to get that? Or did you just think, oh, since I have experience, I need more money. Since I've been here for 5 years, I need more money. But in that 5 years, have you invested in yourself, and now are you bringing more value to your employer? And if so, then hey, by all means, ask for a little more cash in the pocket. But we have to be honest with ourselves and say, did I add value to myself to be able to bring more value to my company? Did I add more value to myself to be able to bring more value to my marriage? Did I add more value to myself to add more value to my friendship? Did I add more value to myself to bring more value to my church, my organization? So we have to start doing those things to add value to ourselves. And so many times we expect others to value us when we haven't spent any time adding value to ourselves. But for some reason, because we've been there we've put in the time, we think we deserve more. You should value me more. I've been here 10 years. Great. What value have you added to yourself to add value to the company? Maybe 10 different jobs. Hey, that's more. You've learned more. Now you're more valuable to the company. But if just because you've been 10 years and you've been a widget cutter and you've been in that same spot for 10 years, why should you make more money? Do you cut it any different? Do you do it any better? Do you have some ingenious idea that's going to make it quicker, save the company money? Or is it just because you expect more money because you've been sitting in that same spot for 10 years? The company would probably love to pay you more if you brought more value than what you started at 10 years ago. And when you start to add value to yourself, there's going to be places just like the son went to the different places that don't value you. They don't value what you have. You've been spending time and energy and resources adding value to yourself. And then you realize, wait a minute, the place I'm in is not valuing me. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a friendship. Maybe it's an organization. Maybe it's your company. You realize that they're not valuing me. And I think sometimes we think, well, I'm not a good enough employee. I'm not a good enough friend. I'm not a good enough spouse. I'm not a good enough whatever. But sometimes, and we have to be honest with this, sometimes we're in a place that doesn't value us. And we need to find that place that puts that value on us. And not a made-up value. The son didn't take a $5 toy watch and expect to get $500,000. The father gave him a 200-year-old watch and told him to take it to different places because he wanted the son to realize the valuable thing he had. And those places that don't value us sometimes are a necessity. They're needed. Because if the son went first to the museum that offered him $500,000, he would have thought, oh, okay. But as the dad showed him, he wanted him to see that those places didn't value the watch like the museum, like the curator at the museum. The son needed to see those experiences to understand that not everybody's going to value it the same. And sometimes when we find that sweet spot is when we find we've added value to ourselves and we find that place that values us. Now that doesn't mean that once we've added value to ourselves, we're on cruise control. No. We've added value to ourselves, we grow, we learn, We found a company that values us. We found a relationship that values us. But now we have to keep working on that. We have to keep adding value to ourselves. And there's no end to that. If I hear a lot of times when preachers are talking about churches, it says if they're not growing, they're dying. And the same thing is true with us. If we're not growing, we become stagnant. Have you ever seen water have a tank, pond, whatever you want to call it, out in my pasture? And when there's no wind, it hasn't rained, the water's not moving, it just sits there, just still as can be. And there's all kinds of junk on the top. It just looks kind of gross and just is not very pleasant. It's stagnant. But when the wind's blowing and there's circulation, there's movement, you can tell it just looks so much fresher, it looks cleaner, it's moving those things out. There's things happening. So and we have to be in a constant state of growth. We're never too old to grow. My dad, we're missionaries when I was a kid. We went to a place that brought us to Texas, that taught missionaries how to translate the Bible into other language. And there was a missionary there that told my dad should write the Bible, should copy it down. And my dad, at that time was in his 30s, 40s probably, 30s. Anyhow, he's like, yeah, like we all are at that age. Of like, I don't have time. I may have 4 kids. He's got all this stuff going on. So yeah. My dad's just about 80, and at the beginning of this year, he started writing the Bible. He started copying the Bible and writing it down. And he told me just recently that he's read the Bible all of his life. He's been a preacher. He's been a missionary, but he's started to understand the Bible in a completely different way than he ever has before by writing it. Just like that missionary told him all those years ago, almost 40 years ago, that when you write it, when you copy it, you'll understand it in a completely different way. My dad has just been amazed at what he has learned and the changes that he has felt and seen from copying the Bible and writing it down. And my dad's almost 80, and he's still growing. He's still growing and taking on new challenges and new tasks. And I challenge each of us to continue to grow and add value to ourselves. So when we add value to ourselves, we can bring value to others. And then we'll put ourselves in those places that best value what we have to offer. And when we're valued, just like the watch was taken to the museum, it was valued at $500,000. We'll be valued at what we are worth. But we have to keep adding that value to make sure our worth keeps going up and placing ourselves in those places that value the value that we bring. And I'd love to connect with you any way I can. You can go to aarondegler.com. We can connect via text, email, have different coaching programs, one-on-one. We can work on increasing your value, growing, learning. What can we do? What's the next step we can do? I'd love to be able to be a part of that and help you continue your growth because we're never too old to keep growing. My dad is great proof of that, 80 years old, and he's been writing a couple hours every day ever since the first year to get through the Bible. So we're never too old to grow. We're never too old to add value, and I'd love to help you find a way that you can add value. So I appreciate you stopping by, taking a little time to join me today, and it's tell my wife Kim every night before I go to bed. It's Bob and Night, AA, out.